Carolyn, are you coming to the table, Carolyn? Carolyn Robertson, Head of Libraries and Information. Oh, sorry, Elaine's side. Sorry, I wasn't. It's very difficult. I'll put my mask back on. You can take your mask off when you speak. Sorry, thank you. I think so. Is that right?
Yeah, she wishes to.
The presenter take their mask off when they're speaking?
Yes.
No. Oh, sorry. Oh, my apologies.
Okay.
I think it's we're going to get some updated information. The new rules come in on the 3rd of February, so I'm going to get some further advice about the meeting. But at the moment, the recommendation is that councillors wear masks during the meeting, except when they're speaking, but it is not a requirement. You're not required to. So, thank you. Sorry, Carolyn.
That's fine. Kia ora koutou katoa. So really Elaine and I are here to answer questions that councillors have. I've got a very brief, very short overview, really just a recap of the report if you want it. Would that be helpful?
I think that would be helpful.
Okay, sure. And then very happy to, obviously, to take questions that you have. So as you're aware, the report was written as a result of a notice of motion passed by the Finance and Performance Committee on the 25th of the 11th, 21. That staff bring a report to council enabling a decision to be made on the removal of fines for overdue library items and all historic debt relating to overdue charges by the end of January 22. Section 3 really outlines the key information about fines, which I think everyone is pretty familiar with now, in terms of how it works, essentially the processes, and also a summary of the benefits of removing fines and the types of feedback received by customers on this issue. So I think a number of people have got feedback, clearly, and we've heard from the deputation. We've taken a sample from the complaints and feedback that people have made directly to the library, and also touched on the trend, as has been made very clear, for public libraries to remove library fines, adult fines, both in New Zealand and overseas, that this is a very well-established trend and growing. So council at the meeting in November, you requested us to consider alternatives for the removals of fines. So what else have we considered, or what else do we have in place? That's section 4. And that includes such things as concession membership, managed accounts, payment plans, renewals of library items for everyone, and regular reminders, how the reminder system works so that people don't get into the situation where they have overdue items and get into financial difficulty. The 5th section provides more detail on the barriers and challenges that customers face via the feedback, so that's detailed with direct anecdotal comment, and also what the experience has been for those libraries that have removed, that have gone fines free. And certainly the major themes are really around increased usage, growth in membership, new and returning, and positive perception of those library services and those councils. And we touch on also the cons. I think we were asked quite directly what are sort of the cons relating to that in terms of, and really there's clearly the financial implications, but the other aspect is, does this actually mean that people don't return the material? Is there a real drop-off in that? And from our research, our understanding is no, that really has made very, very little difference. Section 7 covers off so that's the financial implications of removing fines. And that's detailed really as what that would mean if council makes the decision to do this in terms of revenue, estimated revenue loss in the current financial year, plus the value of the debt write-off, noting that those numbers are always a little bit changeable, and also, which is in total 183,000 is our best estimate, and also the ongoing annual estimated loss in revenue of approximately 300,000 per annum. And then also the related OPEX costs would be reduced in terms of the cost that it takes staff to actually try and recover the fines of around $40,000. And obviously our report also includes our recommendation that council agrees to the removal of charges for overdue items and all historic debt related to overdue charges and we're proposing the 1st of March 2022. Thank you.
Thank you. Are there any questions for staff? Tim?
Thank you. With my dyslexia, I'm a very slow reader, and I've always gone to the library and longingly looked at the new releases. And it's always worded, it must be back within 3 weeks. So I've looked at them, but I've never got one out because it'd just be an automatic fine for me. But now that I'm going to actually take some out because once this has come through, what about the wording with regards within the library to soften that? Because you want the books back within a certain period of time, obviously, because there's a high turnover of popular and new books. But now that there's no kind of fine, so is there a softening of the words, so encouraging people to take books out that are in my position? It was just something to look at anyway, just something to think of.
Short answer, Councillor Scandrett, is yes. We will need to look at actually all our communications around this just to make sure that we're both encouraging. Really what we're wanting to do is encourage people to come back who might have stopped using us. And for people who the library's a barrier, they're not using us at all, they haven't joined because they're worried about this issue. Well, they know people who are, as well as existing users like yourself, just to say, actually, this is how the situation is working now. We want to encourage use, but also we're wanting to remind, and we'll keep reminding people, we're sending out the reminders when you take your items out, that you've still, hey, don't forget about the fact that it needs to come back at some point. That won't be the wording. Elaine will be horrified. But so we will need to look at all our messaging around that to make sure it's consistent with, if this goes through, with the changes that we're making.
I'll get them back as soon as possible, I promise.
Okay.
Jimmy Chen.
Thank you. Two questions. The first one on page 120, paragraph 5.6. You mentioned 14% of the members, customers, are unable to borrow any further items. But do you have any further additional information, particularly by the age, diversify who they are? They are young people, elderly person, or not?
It's across the board.
Across the board?
Yeah.
Okay, but all adults?
Adults,
yes, this is the adult membership.
Okay.
So,
yes.
Second question is regarding to the paragraph 9, risk management implication. 9.1, the financial impact on risk, the financial year from now on till the June. I just want to know all those $183,000, whether the library will absorb all this gap or not. 183 from now on till the end of June.
Made up of what we're estimating as a loss of revenue because we'll be no longer charging fines, and which is approximately $100 and the $100,000. I'm sorry, and the $83,000, which is what we're estimating is the value of the write-off of the historic debt.
But the library can mitigate this effect by yourself.
No.
So for funding 183.
No, we're not proposing that.
Not okay. Last question, just follow this one from now on to the financial year 23. You mentioned you remove those 300,000 and onward per year. But yes. Whether this part of the draft annual plan will have a further discussion or not?
So I
onward from the July 1st, 22 to the end of June 23. Annual plan on.
Yes, so what we've said in there is the revenue, and I'm not sure if our finance manager wants to comment, but has been removed from the draft annual plan working. So in other words, we are not. That is if this goes through, it's not proposing that the library needs to find that in another way, that it's included in the annual plan budget.
Okay, thank you.
Yeah.
You come forward, but you'll have to replace one of the. Sorry.
Yes, just to answer that question, this is low. We have in the draft annual plan, so that we have actually added back that 300, so it has been adjusted for already. Obviously, nothing's been decided until it's adopted, but that has been put in. But on the assumption I was just going through.
Okay, thank you.
I've got James and then Jake.
Thanks. Just following on, I guess, from what Tim was saying, at what point is a late return then a non-return? And are costs recovered, I'm assuming they are, for stolen or non-returned books? And can you just explain to me how that works exactly?
Yeah,
yes, certainly.
So if you take something out, it's due at such and such a time, 28 days after that time, we class that as a lost book.
Yes.
So at that time, customers have already had regular notices, and so then after that, they get an invoice for the cost of that item plus a processing fee. And so
On
then,
top of the late fee, or does that compound?
no,
Or does
then
it just...
when it's returned, the late fee, the cost of the item is removed, and the $21 will be as a fine would be introduced.
I'm sorry, I'm getting into the rats and mice, but it's just a part of it that I just don't quite understand. So, and if it's never returned, say it is lost or stolen, then they'll try and recover it for the cost of the item.
Yeah, so it'll go off to debt collection, and then if they can't find it, then it's written off.
And you kind of answered it, but it was really around: do you expect books to never be returned, or would that increase of loss? Would you expect the number of lost books to at all increase if
Not
adult
really.
fines were removed?
We already have this situation with children's books, so and we
Well aware of that.
so we don't notice. I mean, our buying patterns or replacements are geared towards meeting customer demand, so we can make changes to that, but we don't anticipate there'd be a huge increase in the number of lost books.
And do you find, this is my final question on it, this could just be our household, because I notice that there are Peppa Pig books and wonderful library books that are just constantly at our house from courtesy of Christchurch City Council Library. They're there for a very long time, and I'm glad that there aren't fines associated with them, but the kids love them and they go through periods of wanting to have the same book for a number of nights or weeks sometimes. Given there's no late fines for children and there are fines for adults, do you notice a variance in your own data between the return timings of those two, or is it just our household where that would be quite a marketable one?
No, I think it's across the board. You'll end up getting to the situation where you just keep things at home as for children's books until, I come in to get some more and I can't, so then I have to actually find those ones.
I guess what I'm saying is that a number of days out that a book is that membership or the data identical for child members as it is adult members? Or near enough the same?
It would be about the same.
Is it? Okay.
Yeah.
I don't know that we've done detailed analysis on that, but our sense would be that it's very similar.
Borrowing time for the two membership categories, I was really
that's
asking.
the same.
Jake?
Cool.
Two questions. Thanks, Carolyn. So in terms of this $300,000 cost, I'm aware some councillors are keen to support this on the basis that savings could be found elsewhere. And kind of following on from Jimmy's question, but just to kind of restate it, you're not proposing you're proposing that $300,000 is essentially new money that council would have to find, but libraries themselves aren't proposing to make a quantum of cut and around that figure?
We are no, that's correct. So we're proposing that this is a reduction in our revenue target, really, to that extent. So we did a comprehensive operational savings exercise through the LTP, and so and one of the reasons actually that we didn't put this forward through the LTP was because there was a very, very strong need for operational savings to be made. So we've made a lot of savings in a lot of areas, or reductions where we can. So we feel we've kind of reached the end of the road in that line in terms of these, something of this quantum. We're always looking for efficiencies and savings, of course, but this is a reasonably significant figure.
Right. So it is new money, essentially.
Yes.
Second question is, if council were to kind of earmark an increase in the library's budget, this would be the best way you'd want to spend that money. Like if we were just to write a check for $300,000, it would be library fine write-offs, or you'd rather do something like adding to your collections or something else.
What a great question. I can feel Councillor Templeton's eyes boring into me. Yeah, but no, absolutely. No, I mean, we were really delighted when this came forward from Councillor Templeton. It is something we've been very aware for a number of years that this is what a significant barrier. It's as our the people who spoke to you in the deputation and all the feedback that councillors have received to actually really everything that we can do to maximise use and access and equity of access. And take the negative kind of aspects away that actually our staff deal with too. So we know it's very hard for members of the community, for lots of people, and our staff are at the front line of that. And the more we can do to encourage use and circulation and membership, clearly that's what we're here to do. So short answer is we think it's a very, very good use of that money if this decision is made.
I've got
perfect. And sorry, final question is just in terms of the notice in motion, obviously your proposal to abolish these fines is due for consideration as part of our annual plan process. How did the notice in motion come about? What kind of involvement did you have in getting that in place to abolish these fines a little earlier?
It's probably better to ask the question, did staff have any involvement in shaping the notice of motion? No.
Oh, yeah, sure.
Yeah, so Sarah can answer that.
Yes.
Yeah, I mean, it was my notice of motion. How it came about was I saw a tweet from Pipacoom in Auckland and letting people know that they had done it in Auckland. And so I contacted Auckland Library staff who gave me their information. I checked in with our staff to see whether they would be supportive and what work had been done in the past. And then I brought the notice of motion, but I wrote it.
Yeah.
Yeah.
All right. And, okay, I've got Yanni, Sarah and Sam.
Just to be really clear, were the staff going to come as part of this draft annual plan anyway and recommend that we remove the library fines?
No.
Not until we were approached.
Right. And just like I'm really supportive of this, but I am concerned about why the notice of motion was accepted when we've got an annual plan budget process.
So staff do not answer those questions. We're dealing with the library issues. If you want to address that question, address it to the Chief Executive. We were the ones who accepted the notice of motion, which asked for a report which staff have delivered to this meeting. So if you could frame your question appropriately and politely to the library staff.
Thanks. So I'm just trying to understand from a financial point of view. Like I said, I support this. I'm just trying to understand why it doesn't need to go through the draft annual plan consultation process.
So that's probably a question more for,
Dawn.
it's a legal issue in relation to the consultation process. So if we could have a legal response to that, but that if we could just deal with the issues in relation to the substantive issue, we'll we'll get the answers to the technical issues before we enter into the debate.
I have just several other questions. One was, do we have a sense of the library fines at the moment and the restricted access to this across the different libraries? Like, is there a kind of pattern that you can see around which communities are impacted by this currently?
It goes across all libraries, but there is particularly for people with low socio-economic areas, it is a barrier more so for them, but you can go into any library and there's an issue there around paying fines.
And I'll just add to Elaine's comment that our feedback shows people who are often contacting us about it and with complaints or concerns, the financial aspect is a very key feature. So we haven't actually literally mapped that to where they're living, but that is a very strong theme that comes through.
Okay. Because I guess in the report, and you've touched on that, in some councils, they've noticed that with the fines being removed, that there's not the return of books. So I just was interested in the debt collection costs, because that's actually quite considerable for people. The debt collection agencies charge a fortune, and I just wondered whether there's also any work happening around how to reduce those barriers to people. And just related to that, also does the system have an ability, if we remove the fines, to track individuals around the number of times that books have come back late? So that if you had, a small group of people that were just blatantly abusing the system, that you could monitor and take action in that regard.
Yeah. So we would still follow the current process that we have for lost books, that they have a certain period of time to bring something back, then we would invoice them, and if they don't pay, then they go off to debt collection. And so that debt collection fee is then put in with the amount of money that they actually owe. So several years ago, the library used to absorb that collection fee, but it was seen to be unfair across the board for all customers, or for council to actually have to pay that. So we added that, and that went through the fees and charges process, so that anybody that is referred to debt collection, they get to pay that debt referral fee as well.
Sorry, I get the current process.
Yeah.
What I'm concerned about is, for all the reasons that we're removing library fines, we've still got the same issues around debt collection, and probably even, we've heard a figure of $100. I imagine some of the debt collection figures are way more than that. So what I was interested in is if there's been any thinking around how to reduce that cost and that barrier to people, in terms of the kind of high-level principle that we're looking at in terms of removing library fines.
Yeah. So it's continuing to let customers know when something's late, to encourage them to bring it back before they get into that situation where it is way overdue and they can't use the library anymore and they're referred to debt collection.
We've talked at this stage, knowing that the decision is yet to be made, but talked about how we can actually promote that more. So where there's both our own reporting, and there's a third-party piece of software called Library Elf that does a very easy way of reminding people that we do a really strong promotion around all those ways that we can actually stop you getting to the point, essentially, where you're going to have a lost book and incur
So
those
maybe
charges.
can I just flag as part of the draft annual plan that when you come back around the fees and charges, and obviously we're going to have to make changes if this goes through, that we do get some sense of that as well. Like, do you need funding for the software to do it? Or?
No, we don't.
Are you asking the library staff about a generic debt collection process which actually properly sits with our finance people?
No, I don't think it does. I think it sits with library staff.
Are you still pursuing a line where you are outside the brief for the staff that we have here?
No, because the concern in the report, which staff identify, is that if you remove the fines, there is a risk that people don't return books. So what they've seen in some other places where this has happened is that there's a potential risk that people don't return books. If you take the principle that the notice of motion, and I believe the staff report's trying to address, which is creating greater access and equity to our libraries, one of the other barriers will be the high cost of debt collection, and that will stop people from accessing the libraries, possibly a lot greater than the fines. But I was just interested.
So the high costs of debt collection are included in the trade-off, which is the 100,000, whatever it is. So I don't really want to enter into debate. I think you've had your question asked and answered. Did you have another question related to the issue around library fines?
So just the reference that staff made to the software, is that currently budgeted for, or do you need budget to do that?
No, it's in place now. Yes. It just needs higher promotion. So it's a choice thing for customers to be able to use. So it's a free access.
Okay, thanks.
Thank you. We've got Sarah and then Sam.
Thanks so much. Hey, listen, you mentioned earlier that Selwyn's seen some books that were assumed lost and charged appropriately being returned. Is that because once a fine kind of gets too big and it gets too late, actually it's the fine itself that stops people returning books because they, because they then have to pay it and they feel ashamed and stuff?
Absolutely, yes.
Yeah,
yes.
So fines are in some cases a deterrent to returning books.
That's right, yes. Yes. And again, we can, to add, and again, that's about the campaign. We can have a campaign. We can really actively promote, come back, sort out these kind of issues really as well. I think we can acknowledge that in the communications that we put out, and just the way that we ensure that staff are very aware and can have those conversations with people.
Thank you. Sam and then Phil.
Yeah, thank you both for coming in for it. Just two quick things. One of them was on, I guess, to follow up to James's point, and I probably missed it, but in 5.8, I think it is. Oh yeah, so it's just got in there, if an item is not returned after a specific period of time, it's deemed lost, which is all good. Just for my information, what is that time period? And apologies if I have missed it.
It's 28 days after the item was due.
28 days after. Okay.
That's when they get an invoice. So that's the start of the process, really.
Right. Yeah, so I guess like if I went into the library, and assuming this went through, I went in today, took a book out, at what point under the new, well, whenever it kicks in, under the new system, would that book be deemed as lost?
That still will be the current process now, that just 28 days after it's due, then it's then puts a block on. But you'll get a notice 3 days before it's due to remind you to bring it back.
Right.
And then you get another one about 7 days after it's due. So there's several reminders that we will send you.
Yeah, okay. And just the only other one, and I appreciate, because I know when we had the notice of motion come through, I talked about the need for the alternate options,
Yes.
and I'm grateful that you've done that. Can you just in really layman's terms explain to me, and it's probably my really too simplistic view on a lot of stuff, just around what I thought would have been a good model was just like a compassionate consideration type thing, so where things become an issue, because by and large keep a bit of tension in the system with the fines, but if something got bad or there was staff that said, look, we don't think this is working, that they could, end up on one of your desks. Which alternate option would that be?
Well, really, I mean, the concession membership that we have currently, I mean, that actually covers, depending on what the issues are, but if people feel that they have access issues, I mean, we've said in here physical or mental disability, but I mean, that can be a pretty broad spectrum as well. But if it's hard for people, then we can set them up with a concession membership if they meet the criteria. So it's only a small number of total members that actually are in that category. Yeah. But again, that is something that all staff are very aware on the front line, that is an option when they're joining people up. Right. And the other one is the managed, we also have, and this is a very small number, but the managed accounts. So that might, and with agreement with the customer, that they would be limited to a smaller number of items, which would be their choice to do that. As well as the payment plans and other things that I've detailed there.
So is there any ability, I guess, for if something happens, say someone has 5 books out and something horribly goes really wrong in their life,
yes.
At the moment for them to come in and see one of you and have those wiped?
There is, so yes, we can waive. So we give our senior staff the right. ability to waive under exceptional circumstances. So absolutely, that is an option there.
Perfect. No, that's great. Thank you. Cheers.
Thank you. I've got Phil next.
Hi, thanks very much. It's always good to see you guys. But will this make it more enjoyable for your staff to go to work? Because I'm sure that you get people who, I'd never be a librarian to be fair, but they go along because they want to meet people and they enjoy books. They've got better things to do with their life than fill out bits of paper and chase money. So it's going to make it.
Yes, I was sort of trying to touch on. Thank you for asking that. I was trying to touch on that before. I mean, our primary focus is on our citizens and customers, but yes, our staff do not enjoy having those. There's often quite distressing conversations because people are often upset whether they're ringing up or coming in, and for often for very good reasons. But that's not easy for staff to be dealing with.
And that's not what they put their hand up to do the job for.
No,
that's good.
Right.
Thank you.
Positive, good service is what they're focused on delivering. Yes.
Yeah, that was Aaron.
Yeah, sorry, it's just a quick question because I note in it's quite a big change to change the system like this, as in the way people have lent books for a long time. And Sam's questions alluded to fines being able to be wiped under circumstances, which is good. Video libraries always did that, and so on, and other businesses, so libraries should as well. There'll be a lot of claims made in a couple of minutes' time when we go to debates on outcomes and scenarios and what does and doesn't happen from both sides and the costs and the benefits and everything else. And it's a big cost, $300,000. Was there consideration given to putting a time trial on this, like either a year? And I note with the library, the Trafford Library, there was the increase after the year, but also after 2 years. So reviewing, rather than just going, no, we'll just change everything and then just leave it, which is often what we do at council, but we don't review the impacts because it could be exceptionally good, could have not much impact and cost us a lot of money. So was that not in the report as an option, that it should be done, reviewed after a year or 2 years to see whether the intention has been met?
I think I'd just say that, so that wasn't in the scope of the notice of motion, but I would say that the library will be very keen to monitor how this is actually going, whether it is meeting the needs that council intend or not, and whether it's a trial or not. I think I'm leaving that to you to discuss, but in terms of evaluation and impact, we will be doing that. We're more than happy to come back to council. In fact, we would expect to come back to council and let you know, if this is decided, how it's going. What are I think, Leanne, you might have asked, what are the pros in terms of the pros and cons, and that information is still coming from our other libraries in New Zealand. We've been asking those questions, but it's reasonably early days for a lot of libraries. We'll be exactly in the same boat, very keen to understand what the impact of this is.
Yeah, I've got Anne and then Sam.
Sorry.
Sorry, Aaron.
So it's a question for you, Leanne, because we often don't review stuff we do. We might get updates, but it's a done deal. Like, you remove the fines, they're just gone forever. Why would we not put a timeline on this to see whether it's worked, and then it either stays or it goes after?
I don't make that decision. I'm in the meeting's hands. So if you wish to move an amendment that it is formally reviewed after a period of time, then that's perfectly in order. But I will let Sarah respond, because it's her notice of motion that led to this.
Yeah, I was asking a question actually. So there's a difference between reviewing something after a period of time, 6 months and a year, and the libraries do regular reporting to the committee, and so I'd expect that to come through there. But if this was advertised and framed as a trial, do you think it would have the full impact anyway? So if people thought that they get a book out and then they might not realise that we've put fines back on again if it hasn't worked, those kind of things, it might actually put people off coming back in.
I think the other side of it is a lot of difficult conversations when, after removing fines and then putting them back on, there's an assumption that removing them is there forever.
If we didn't let people know.
And then you have to actually have, okay, it was all right last year, you could do that, but now you have to pay again. That's really
We'd really have to work the communications to ensure that we, didn't have a problem from that point of view.
Yeah, it wouldn't be. No, it's a decision.
So, Anne, you had a question.
Thanks, Carolyn. Just clarifying, what age? I mean, children up to what age have to have an adult with them in a library? They can't just come into a library, can they? Children, they have to be over 12.
Yeah, so that's what we've got at the moment.
Yes, over 12. Yes. Yeah, so no child can come into a library on their own until they're over 12. Right. Yeah.
Correct.
No.
Actually.
It's not possible to have a conversation around the table. So
my understanding is the Rangatamariki says that they should have supervision. Is that correct? Yes, that's correct.
Yes.
Sorry, I found that difficult to hear. So you're saying that in order to enter a library, if you're under 12, you have to be accompanied by an adult?
Yes.
Thank you.
Correct.
Sam?
Yeah, thanks. Sorry, just one more, and it was a sort of follow on to what you were saying before about the, senior staff having the ability to waive fines as it stands. So if we look at like 5.5 and we've got the customer feedback from people, are they situations now, like I'm just trying to understand the level of when things would be waived. So if someone comes in saying, like it's got in here, I had a customer crying on the phone, she couldn't pay the fine, she was a solo mother. I mean, I'm just wondering at what point would that be waived? Like, surely something like that would be waived under the current settings now. Is that?
It's usually sort of a negotiation. I mean, you can't. There's always some customers that will try that every time, and you don't really know whether it's true or not.
Right. Yep.
But it's also we do waive, and we might negotiate that. How about you pay half, or
cool.
that kind of scenario.
Yeah, so it's quite a personal thing, and you work with them.
It's hard. Sorry, and it's hard. I think it's quite hard to pull these quotes out because I think reading that you would think, why on earth wasn't that?
Well, that's why I was wondering why because they're quite emotive.
Yeah,
and I just thought I didn't want to leave the public with the impression that we couldn't waive some of these, given there is already a system in place. So I am right in thinking we can. You've got that discretion. We can waive that now.
Yes, we have. We make sure we just look into it very thoroughly, and we're even-handed in our treatment of it too. So
no, that's fantastic. Cool. Thank you. That's great.
So just as a follow-up from that, so walk us through a situation where somebody in one of these circumstances comes into the library not realising that they've had their library privileges withdrawn, and go to take out a book. They're then told that, no, you've got this outstanding fine. What then happens? I mean, do you take them away to a private part of the library in order to have a conversation, or are they referred to somebody to have that private conversation? Or, you know, what's the process?
Well, so generally speaking, we certainly encourage staff to be having those conversations as confidentially, you know, in a sense of privacy as they can do, and to encourage our staff on the front, you know, in our frontline service to be able to have those conversations and, if possible, resolve the situation at that point of time. So again, it's about good customer service and everything we can do to ensure that the customer is informed, understands the situation, has some constructive ways to actually deal with it. If it can't be resolved at that point, then we would want to arrange with that person to have a phone conversation or a meeting to talk through further, which would be with somebody who was, you know, possibly more experienced. We've got experienced frontline staff, but with a more senior staff member, particularly if it's a fairly complex situation, or there's more information comes out later, because all sorts of things can actually happen here. And for us to understand too, have we let the side down somewhere? Is there something that we haven't done in terms of our communication with that customer, so that we're really looking at it as widely and comprehensively as possible?
So when you identify the cost of the enforcement system, you've actually left out a significant chunk of time and effort by senior staff.
That is correct. Yes, that's right. We haven't touched on that. If you costed all that time that happens at those interactions when people come in and, as you say, find out that their membership is blocked, or they've got money owing, there is a large period, you know, large amount of time there, that's not factored into this.
And there were just, I'll come back to, I've got Sarah and then Sam, but I just wanted to confirm, I looked at some international research online, and they found that eliminating fines gave more time to library staff to help the public, reduces bad interactions with the public, and reduces inequities for lower income patrons. But focusing on those first two, is that your understanding of what the experience would be here, that library staff would be freed up from these difficult conversations and more able to focus on getting good results?
Absolutely. The positive services, yes, the positive engagements with customers and the promotion of our services to people. Yes.
Yeah. Okay. Sarah and then Sam.
Thanks so much. Listen, we know that you do wipe fines under some circumstances, that it is a little time consuming, but that does happen, which is great. But we also know from experiences that you've shared with us and that the community has shared and emailed and those kind of things, that actually there's still a lot of people in very difficult circumstances. You know, a partner's gone to hospital, a range of different things where fines haven't been wiped. Do you think that, how easy is it to draw the line in those circumstances? And is it down to people's capacity to approach staff in those circumstances? And do you think that if we made that more widely known, people maybe would take up more staff time by more people coming forward with more stories that maybe not actually correct? Do you see what I mean? It's like if people knew that was just kind of what you did, if someone had a circumstances, then
It's the squeaky wheel.
As I think you touched on, Councillor Templeton, sometimes people just who are in dire circumstances don't let us know that at all. They just drop out of the system, really, from our point of view. So yes, some people will make it very, very clear to us, even when it's not necessarily a major issue, and others will just kind of quietly go away and kind of worry about it, and their relationship with their library for them and their family, it just ends at that point.
Yeah, thanks.
Sam.
We'll go all day.
Yeah, okay. Sarah, I'm assuming you'd like to move the motion? Yep.
I've still got a couple of questions.
Oh, Sorry, I can't see you from here.
I know,
I'm gonna
it's
have
hard
to
over
ask-
Zoom.
I'm going to have to ask someone else to keep an eye on that. Jake.
Two final questions. In terms of, we're obviously considering this notice of motion today. We've got an annual plan decision that's upcoming. Have you given any thought to, I guess, the potential that we may make a decision here that may differ from the annual plan? And, you know, we could, for example, remove library fines today and then, you know, reinstate them in the annual plan. Have you kind of thought about that from a comms perspective?
We'll get the Chief Executive to respond to that question.
So, at the end of the discussion, Mayor, you asked for us to say what is the legal position.
Yeah.
So if you're happy for me to deal with that at the end, in case there are any other questions in relation to Councillor Hanston and Councillor McCallum.
So are there any other substantive issues that you want to raise, Jake, or should we get the Chief Executive?
Yeah, I want to circle back to the notice in motion, because it was sort of jumped in and answered by a politician. But from a staff perspective, we've got this annual plan decision. The notice in motion, what kind of involvement did staff have in forming that notice in motion?
We just heard from staff. That question has been asked and answered, and I'm not going to put up with any nonsense. Staff said they had nothing to do with the notice of motion. So can we...
When did they say that?
Carolyn answered the question. So, I mean, you're not in the room. Everyone in the room heard her answer that question.
And Councillor Sarah Templeton then said exactly what happened and when in what order.
I mean, legal clearly checked the wording like they do with every notice of motion, but that's it. They were my words.
Can we just move on from this? And I'm now going to ask for Dawn and or Helen to respond to the legal issues, the technical issues, and the annual plan issues in relation to Councillor Johansson and Councillor McClellan.
Just first in relation to the consultation question, the scale of the budget we're talking about is not significant or material in relation to the library's activity that's already been approved by you in the long-term plan. So this is a matter that is able to be dealt with within the annual plan process without requiring, from a legal perspective, a separate consultation.
Thank you.
Was there another question, Mayor, that I could help with?
Well. Does that cover your question, Jake?
Oh, it doesn't pertain to it at all, but it's an interesting answer. Yeah, it's completely separate from it.
So restate your question.
Well, my question was to the library staff, which is, have they thought about the consequences of...
But this is not for the library staff. I've already ruled on that, Jake. Could you please focus your question? Just state your question. I will determine who will answer it. Please state your question.
Okay. The question is, has the organisation thought about the consequences of us removing library fines now and then reinstating them at the annual plan?
Jake, can I answer that? If that happened, we should all resign from our seats. It's in about 6 weeks' time. Yeah. Seriously.
So,
which begs the question:
the section that Jake is referring to is the fines section, which is kind of independent of the annual plan to the extent that it's a separate motion. So it's not the motion. You know, it's part of the whole.
I mean,
whole process.
It's a pretty loaded question, though. I mean, ultimately, if we're not going to be consistent here, the same people are going to be here in 6 weeks' time.
Yeah.
So I'm not sure. Yeah.
Could make an inconsistent decision at any meeting.
We are. Yeah. I mean, the reality is that what happens today is likely to be the same, so it's probably not relevant.
Ultimately, this is an in-year budget matter. We can deal with it in year. The notice of motion came in asking for a report. You all supported that, if my memory serves me correctly. That report has come forward. We have stated how we could deal with this if you want to. If you choose not to, that is fine. And in reality, in anticipating, not determining where you might be, we have been able to look at that from an annual plan perspective to ensure it is included in the figures if it needs to be. I think we're dancing on the head of a pin.
Yeah, I agree.
And I ask members actually to just step back and deal with the matter in front of you.
I've got Yanni and then James.
Sorry, it just so as part of the LTP, some of us had amendments for $20,000 or $30,000 that were ruled out of order.
Yanni, could you stop?
I'm just trying to understand the process. Obviously, when we go up for consultation in the draft annual plan, this will be listed as a change.
Yes.
People will have the right to make submissions. So although we won't have a specific SCP, we will actually have an engagement over the draft annual plan around changes to levels of service, etc. Right? So what I'm just trying to understand though, the timing of this, because like if we as councillors wanted to do notice of motions on other things financially, are we able to do that ahead of the draft annual plan? And what's the process? We just get a staff report.
James?
No, I'll withdraw it and let's just move on.
Helen and Leah, would you please like to comment? I think I've dealt with the matter. I'm not sure what else I can actually say.
Because normally, if some of us put notice of motions in, we're told...
We're tying different things together and previous matters.
I think all I can add to that, Chief Executive, is that, yes, of course, standing orders allow for you to lodge notices of motion and they'll be dealt with in accordance with the standing orders and the resolutions that this meeting would ultimately make.
Sorry, microphone.
Still on questions?
I thought the questions are finished. Jake, did you have another question?
No.
Well, where's the question from?
Sorry, we haven't got a motion on the table yet.
Yes, we have. We had it moved by Sarah, seconded by Mike. Did
you get that one?
So, but can I just leave this, come back to adjourn this item and come back to it in a